think it is always about the balance, and obviously the risk community understands that the risk is always about what's the probability of something bad happening and what's the impact of that. And you need to have controls and processes in place that will drive both probability and the impact down. And for that, you do have your protection measures to make sure that it is more difficult to get into your environment. But at the same time, you need detection and response and backup and recovery measures so that you can get back up and running quicker or reduce the scope of the impact.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Ilia Sotnikov. Ilya is a security strategist and vice president of user experience at Netwrix, which is a vendor of information security and governance software. Ilya has over 20 years of experience in cybersecurity as well as IT management experience during his time at Netwrix, Quest Software, and Dell. In his current role, Ilya is responsible for technical enablement, user interface, and design and product vision across all product portfolio at Netwrix. So, Ilya, welcome to our Risk Management Show podcast today.
Hello, Boris. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Our pleasure as well. So, I believe that we will have a very thoughtful conversation on the topic of the downsides of illegalizing ransomware payments and alternative approaches to fighting ransomware and malware. But before that, Ilya, could you tell us a short story about yourself, your career path, and what brought you to where you are right now, and what you guys at Netwrix are up to these days?
Absolutely. So I started back in the days with a small company called Ilia Software that was then acquired by Quest, and later on joined Netwrix about 11 years ago. I joined Netwrix first as a product manager, and I was leading and building the product management organization initially. Over time, I started to wear multiple hats, and right now, like you said, I'm participating in the product vision and leading the teams that are providing product documentation and product UX, user experience, UI designs, things like that. And also, I'm just overall curious about what is happening in cybersecurity. So following a lot of topics here and spend time thinking about this and trying to give back to the community doing shows like this.
Fantastic. So let's dive into the topic. What are the potential unintended consequences of making ransom payments illegal, particularly for businesses and organizations targeted by cyber criminals?
So this is a big and loaded question. And I think the biggest challenge is that it is a complex problem. Ransomware is a multifaceted challenge with multiple players and multiple unintended consequences and ripple effects potentially. You've got the threat actors, you've got the organizations that are victims of the ransomware attack, but then there are insurance companies, there are consumers who are impacted by the downtime. Those consumers are taxpayers. So now the governments, if there is a big impact, the governments are impacted as well, and the politicians are involved. Sometimes ransomware attack is also, if we talk about North Korea, for example, they are starting to use ransomware as the way to get funding. So sometimes it is an international affair question as well, and you've got military intelligence involved. So for a very, very complex challenge like that, a simple solution rarely works well, right? It's very, very seldom when you can come up with a very short and simple answer and say, okay, problem solved, when there are so many different players involved and when there are so many different aspects potentially involved in the issue.
So, what do you think organization how do organization would respond if a ransom payment were made illegal? Would it lead to reduction of attacks, or could it have some other unintended, maybe good and bad consequences?
So we can think about different types of organizations and different sizes. Larger organizations, and especially those who are in the highly regulated and highly risky industries like military or finance, we don't hear, defense contractors paying ransom. We don't hear about large banks paying ransom because they have the risk management process, they have the resources, they have the teams in place and the processes to fight ransomware. So most likely those larger organizations, and especially in the risky, in the traditionally risky areas, will not be impacted by this kind of legislation at all. However, a smaller organization will have to make a very hard choice. If you're a medium-sized business, maybe 100 people, you don't have top of the top talent in cybersecurity roles because you can't afford it, because all of those people are with the big guys who can pay bigger checks. But you do have some people in IT who are doing their fair share of protecting your environment, but you don't have the guarantees, you don't have the way to bounce back quickly. And this means if you are the business owner of that medium-sized organization, or even a larger organization, but not particularly focused on security, you have a very difficult dilemma. You either stay compliant with the regulation, you don't pay the payment, the ransom, you report it to the officials, they start the process, there probably some sort of process, hopefully some sort of procedure to get you back to the business, but it will take weeks and probably months to get you back if all of your data, all of your systems are down. What does that mean to a business, to a small business? Very likely you're probably going out of business at all. And I doubt that governments will have a way to subsidize these types of scenarios to keep the companies afloat, especially if it is a larger population. And we see that there is a number of ransomware attacks is never going down. It is only going up, even in the recent years. Or if you don't want to go out of business, you have to commit a crime, essentially. You have to pay the ransom, which is illegal. So either way, you are in trouble as a company, as a business owner. So that's one challenge. The other problem is, what is the ripple effect of your company not being able to do business? Just recently, just in June this year, a couple examples. One, an attack on the services provider in the UK, Synovis, that is providing the clinical test services for the hospitals in London, in England. Essentially, for several days, blood sampling was delayed for the hospital for the several hospitals serving millions of people, which means, surgeries were canceled or delayed, which means blood transfusions were not possible. NHS, the National Health System in the UK, had an emergency call to the donors with the universal blood types, with the blood type O, to come and donate, because when it is not possible to do the blood sampling, and you at least know that the universal blood is available, you at least can serve the critical cases and not delay or cancel those where the lives are actually endangered. So, in situation like this, if you know that paying a ransom could take you up and running, in a day or 2 days, is it ethical? Is it moral to ban ransomware payment in this case? That's a tough question. I don't know the answer, but sometimes lives are at stake. Uh, so yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are the alternative strategies? Because beyond making ransomware payments illegal, what other strategies or policies could be effective in reducing the prevalence of ransomware attacks? Are there any innovative approaches currently being explored?
So frankly, I think it's not the innovation. It's the opposite. We do have successful examples of fighting crime, and you know, in the 1960s, 1970s, bank robberies or airplane hijacks were happening, all around. And if you look at the news headlines in those years, or if you watch the movies about that time, that was the thing. It was just happening. How many bank heists do we hear about today? How many airplane hijacks do we hear about today? So I think there are definitely lessons that our industry could learn from the others. In the bank robbery, we do not make the clerk who is handing over the money, we do not make him a criminal. We do not, charge him for doing that. He's a victim. He's not a criminal. Uh, but this does not mean that the banks are not doing anything. There are license requirements. In order to obtain a license, the bank has to invest in security. They have to pass certain minimum standards. There is insurance that has their own standards. And this is happening in the cybersecurity industry as well. Cyber insurance is evolving and is requiring a certain level of protection and certain controls in place. Uh, there is surveillance, there is detection, there are mechanisms to trace the money, etc. So it's about a combination of actions that the industry can do, the governments have to do, the insurance industry can certainly help there as well. Um, it's it's not a single way that will magically solve all the problems. It is a intricate web of different uh, of different approaches that are balancing each other and
Yeah.
helping in different situations.
Yeah, now I know that insurance premium up very high in the sky. So I'm not sure if some small companies can afford this kind of insurance anymore.
So it is interesting how this industry is evolving, though. If you look at them, there are ways to drive the premiums down, and we know from our clients and from our study that implementing certain controls like privileged access management or data access governance, etc. If you have certain processes and tools in place, uh, the insurance companies are seeing that as reducing the chance and the amount of the impact and the amount of the payout. And so the premiums are going down as well, and you can negotiate there. Uh, and another interesting thing that we see in the insurance industry, in the cyber insurance, is that in the early days, the the policies actually covered the ransom payout. Today, I don't think you can find a plan that will cover that.
Mhm.
They realize that, hey, this is only making things worse because there were leaks from some of the internal communications in ransomware gangs where they were discussing uh, reading the company documents and specifically trying to find their insurance contracts to know how much they can write off with the insurance. And so driving negotiations, because they knew that the company would be more agreeable if they stay within that limit. So it's an evolving thing for sure. And yes, for the small companies, insurance can be tough, but there are ways to make certain investments and certain changes in the process that will both make you more secure and less prone for the attack, and as well at the same time will help you get a better price on your insurance plan.
Mhm. So, because our members mostly are risk and compliance managers, so what they should prioritize right now that to tackle this issue?
So I think it is always about the balance, and obviously the risk community understands that the risk is always about what's the probability of something bad happening and what's the impact of that. And you need to have controls and processes in place that will drive both probability and the impact down. And for that, you do have your protection measures to make sure that it is more difficult to get into your environment. But at the same time, you need detection and response and backup and recovery measures so that you can get back up and running quicker or reduce the scope of the impact if you do like environment segregation, isolate different processes so that an attack on one machine or on one segment of your environment does not bring the entire thing down. So those are the things, and it is very, very important in my view to pay attention to the balance. If you overinvest in one area but kind of miss the rest of it, it makes you more vulnerable, and it is not making you resilient. And that's what we are trying to achieve here. It's not avoiding the attack, it's getting back as soon as we can and with the minimum impact.
Awesome. So, Ilya, I would like to ask you a personal point of view. What are the major misconceptions in this field of ransomware attacks, and that you kind of strongly disagree with?
That's a good question. Give me a second to think about this. So one misconception that we basically started with is, hey, there is an easy way to deal with it, right? No, there is no easy way to deal with it. Banning or prohibiting or doing something along those lines will not stop the problem, will not stop the ransomware gangs. I think another big misconception, and I think in the recent few years, we see that this is changing. Another big misconception is that the law enforcement cannot do much about this, and ransomware gangs are often located in the jurisdictions where they have the safe haven and they cannot be reached there. However, we see that with bigger visibility into the issue, there are definitely ways how governments and law enforcement and even intelligence community can be involved to disrupt the ransomware operations. And there is a number of awesome examples of the international cooperations where the agencies across European Union and UK and the US are joining forces to disrupt those operations, sometimes even get the decryption keys to the victims, as well as recover some of the ransom payments and get those Bitcoin wallets back.
Yeah, yeah.
So these are great examples, and I think visibility of the issue. So one thing that legislators can actually do, instead of banning ransomware, they can improve and clarify the regulations around incident reporting, because when the issue is more visible, the governments can actually scope it and can actually fund their response and do their share of work here. Of course, this will not solve all the issues. Again, there is no single single approach that will completely solve it, but this can definitely help to bring it out of the shadows and have the authorities act on it. So those are some thoughts here.
All right, fantastic. So are there any emerging trends, developments in the field of ransomware cyber protection that you would like to share with us?
It is an arms race. It is constantly evolving. If you look at ransomware 10 years ago, when the times of NotPetya and WannaCry, it's changed completely since then. Ransomware gangs are way more complicated. They run the industry. They are building their reputation to be known for good customer quote unquote customer support, because they want people to actually trust and pay them. So they're kind of taking care of that like a normal business. This is amazing, but and things continue to change. We've seen double extortion, where ransomware gangs are not just encrypting your data, but also stealing it and threatening the victims that they will publish it. There is more in terms of tooling and ways how they plan the attacks and how they employ the technology. And now we see that the initial vectors of attack, the phishing emails, for example, are amplified by the generative AI, because now you can create a more targeted phishing email. You can create it in the in the languages that you as a ransomware operator do not speak even, but you can still target people in multiple jurisdictions and multiple locations. So we hear some examples of of phishing success in the areas where it even hasn't been a case, in Japan or South Korea. So there are multiple things happening, and the attackers are ramping up their game, so the defenders have to as well. And for every new challenge, there is a new set of responses. So, but the basics are pretty much the same. You still have to invest in multiple areas of cybersecurity. You have multiple layers of defenses to make sure that if one level is breached, if the phishing email is successful and the user clicks that link or installs that malware, what happens next? It should not lead to the entire global operation cease. It should not lead to the fallout of the entire company. So you have to have your endpoint protection. You have to have your detection and response in place. What about the identities and privileges? How do you prevent the lateral movement? How do you prevent the privilege escalation? So essentially, the tooling may change, the specific tactics may change, but overall, it's the same game. And I'm sure that your audience knows the hard way how to play it.
All right, fantastic. So we are closing our interview. So if you summarize it for someone who is listening and would like to walk away with one or two major takeaways, what would that be?
I think two takeaways. One, on a general level, banning something will not stop the bad guys. It's just not happening. So it is a much more complex issue. You have to approach that with a different set of with a different way how you look at it. It's not solved by simply banning something. And then the second thing is, for you personally, as someone responsible for risk management or for the defense of an organization, look for achieving the balance and make sure that your multi-level defenses are covering the entire spectrum. You don't have the gaps, and it's better to not have a best-in-class detection if you don't have any way to respond to an attack. It doesn't do you any good. You need to make sure that you are investing throughout the spectrum here.
Fantastic, Ilya. So these were all my questions. Perhaps if I forgot to ask you some important questions for you, please go ahead.
No, I think we covered it very well. Thank you, Boris.
Yeah. So tell us about a few things about your company, Netwrix. What does it do?
Absolutely. So Netwrix is a company that is on a mission to make your data more secure and to let you focus on your core business and not on the security and thwarting the attacks. We are a software vendor. We have multiple solutions for data security, for identity security, as well as for the infrastructure security. We understand that data does not exist in a vacuum, even though it is usually the target for the attackers. They get to data through infrastructure, through identities. So we provide you with a set of tools, with a set of products and solutions that cover all of the attack surfaces. And we've been in business for well over 15 years now. We are a global company, happy to answer any specific questions. Find me on LinkedIn, reach out.
Fantastic, Ilya. Thank you very much for your very thoughtful interview, and we will be in touch. And I wish you a great success and your company in protecting our lives from this ransomware attacks.
Thank you, Boris. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.